I'm going to begin with, now that I have this pulled up on my side so that I can watch comments as they come in, I'm just going to start with a brief description for my idea with this series. This particular series of lives will be to give the community that's growing around my channel the opportunity to get together, ask questions, meditate together, and deepen their practice of what I call the five foundations of meditation. Of course, as everyday modern lay people, let's say, we're dealing with all the challenges of modern life. We're dealing with jobs, children, husbands and wives, partners, bosses, employees. We're dealing with all of the complexities of living in the modern world and trying to have a semblance of some kind of normal life. So, how is it that we do all of this while also training in meditation? Well, that's a very complicated, very complicated issue. But after 20 years of personal practice and some extensive retreats and training with a lot of traditional teachers, and then a lot of research for my PhD and my master's into meditation and Asian philosophies more generally, what I've come to is that there are five main categories of meditation. And if you build up five foundational skills of meditation and you understand those skills and how they function in the process of training and meditation quite deeply, quite well, then all other types of meditative practice, which are based upon those initial five sets of skills, will then be open to you. So that is the five foundations of meditation. So once again, the idea with this particular series and this particular stream, Sit and See, is that we're actually going to sit as a community. I'm going to try to stream these during the time period where it's fairly convenient for everyone else. Real life notwithstanding, if I can get on here between 12 and 2 every day and stream for 1 or 2 hours, then we can all do some practice together. And we can deepen our understanding of what meditation is, how it functions, and how to be successful in it in the midst of living in the real world. So, without further ado, since I'm not seeing a lot of activity in the chat as of yet, why don't we just jump straight in to Foundation 1? What is the first foundation of meditation? If you look at the ancient texts on meditation, what you find is that the ancient texts on meditation quite often talk about the. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm going to share this over to my other page. Okay. Share this over to the group that's been training with me. Okay. Excellent. So now we're back up to speed, right? Okay. So let's talk about Foundation 1, what I call Foundation 1. If you look at the ancient texts on meditation, what you find is that the initial stages of meditation are described even in texts that are incredibly ancient, over 1,000 years old, that the initial stages of meditation are what frustrate most people and stop most people from making significant progress. You have probably had this experience where you sit down to meditate and you place your mind on your breath with great intensity, and then it seems like your mind has gone completely nuts. Yes? We've all had this experience. You sit down to meditate, you place the mind on the breath, and then it seems like your mind has gone absolutely, completely insane. More insane than your mind has ever been in your entire life. So, the initial stages of meditation, according to some of the oldest texts on meditation on the planet, have to do with overcoming this initial stage where our mind seems to go completely nuts when you try to make it do something in particular. So this practice that I have personally done for many years was recommended by one of my teachers with 50 years of experience in Tibetan Buddhism and Zen practice, is what I call Foundation 1. Now, for those of you who have done a lot of breath practice and breath training, you're going to find that this particular practice doesn't dive that deep into what you can do with the breath, and that's on purpose. That's absolutely deliberate, because the initial stages of meditation, if you're looking at Kamala Shila's great text on meditation, the Bhavanakrama, for example, the first 4 stages of meditation have to do with stopping your mind from jumping off what it's doing and jumping to the next thing. So the first foundation is being able to stop your mind from doing that. And the breath is okay for what are called the first and second stages of calm abiding, the first and second stages of training the mind in actual meditative concentration. Okay? So we've got a few people watching now. If you have questions, I'm happy to veer off from what I'm doing and to answer any questions you have about general meditation or mind training topics. That's part of the point of Sit and See. But the overall point of this live is to talk about how to train in meditation as a city-dwelling, normal, modern layperson, and then to actually do some practice together. So please do drop your questions, comments, concerns in the chat, and I'm just going to carry on with the description of this first technique, and then we're going to do some of that practice. And after I get done with that, or we get done with that, hopefully, then we'll carry on and go into open questions and then do some more practice. So Foundation 1 is the ability to place the mind on a particular object of concentration with, as Pabonka Rinpoche in one of his great Lamrims and Lama Tsongkhapa in one of his great Lamrim texts indicated, you have to do with a great deal of force, because your mind's habit to run and chase stuff is absolutely unbelievable. You have almost an infinite capability. Your mind has an almost infinite capability to make stuff up and run away with it. It's like a train going 1,000 miles an hour that weighs a huge amount. In India, they would just say it's like a wild elephant. It's like a drunk wild elephant. So how do you stop something moving with that much force and intensity? Well, you need to generate something else with a great deal of force and intensity to act as a direct counteracting antidote to this problem. Okay. Hello, Offer John. Welcome back. Right. So what is this antidote that we're going to apply to this problem of the mind being like a wild elephant or a big train or a big rock moving down a hill in terms of distraction? How are we going to counteract this? We're going to counteract it with what I call Foundation 1. Foundation 1 is a breath meditation technique that's fairly simple. Was taught to me by one of my main teachers. I've done this practice for about 20 years, and it was the foundational practice that really started unlocking meditation for me And it was his recommendation to do this practice in this particular way based upon his 50 years of experience in both Zen and Tibetan practice. So what is this? What is the specific technique? So the specific technique is to hold that thought. Let's back up just slightly. As you're sitting there in your room or wherever you happen to be, just go like this and just feel the sensation on the back of your hand. Okay? So if you do this and you feel the sensation on the back of your hand, what you'll notice is that your mind probably right away starts coming up with new thoughts. It goes, oh, that's a warm sensation. That's a tingly sensation. That's a scratchy sensation. Why is this guy talking about all this stuff? Blah, 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 blah. Your mind will just go on and on and on and on and on. Okay? So after a very short period of time, your mind stops focusing on the actual tactile sensation, which was the task you set it on, right? The task was quite simple. Feel the actual tactile sensation. And yet your mind ran away with probably a dozen thoughts in a fraction of a second. So you have to distinguish between your mind actually staying with a tactile, to be successful in this first meditation, the foundation one, you have to distinguish between your mind actually staying with the tactile sensation that we are going to select momentarily and running away with a bunch of thoughts that are unrelated to the practice. That's a really important piece of background, that you need to keep the mind on the actual tactile sensation. So let's just do a very brief session where that's all we're doing, and then we're going to add pieces on, and your own experience will justify to you why it's important that we're doing it in that particular way. Okay? So let's just start with, maybe we'll just do counting, we'll do about 7 breaths, which for me is going to take a lot longer than for you because I breathe quite slowly. So just wait until I call you. All right. I'll ring a little bell. Hopefully you can hear this. Yeah. Does that come through? This is day 1. I'll be better prepared next time. Okay. Okay. So let's just start by breathing in through the nose. So close your mouth. For the sake of simplicity and focus, close your eyes too. That means that there'll be more bandwidth in your mind to focus on tactile sensations. So go ahead and close the eyes completely. And I can justify, for those of you who are interested later, I can justify why it's good to do that at this stage. So breathe in through the nose. And breathe in a little more forcefully than normal. Where do you feel the most sensations? You don't need to answer the question, just bring your mind to that particular location in the nostril. Okay, so wherever you happen to feel the most tactile sensations today, that's the place where you're going to place your mind for this exercise. There's some location at the tip of the nostril or just inside the nostril, one of the nostrils, where you're going to feel the most sensations. Place your mind on those sensations. Don't do anything else. Don't imagine anything. Don't think anything. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't come up with a new philosophy for life. Just place your mind on the actual tactile sensations of the breath. Okay? So I'm going to do that for 7 breaths. It may take me a little longer than you, but I'll ring the bell when we're done. So just keep your eyes closed and keep your volume high enough that you can hear the bell. Okay? All right, here we go. Okay. So comments or questions, put them in the chat. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about what I suspect happened for those who stuck around for the meditation. What I suspect is that you tried to place your mind on those sensations, and after a short period of time, your mind began wandering and thinking about things or analyzing the breath in some way that you did not intend. And probably even in that short period of time, it was difficult for your mind to stay on task and rather than jumping off to something else. So if that's the case, you can just let me know in the chat. If that's the case, which I'm sure it is for most people who are watching this live or who find it later on, here's the solution. You need to add another tool, another layer to the meditation that lets you know when your mind is leaving the object, right? Because the object you selected was the sensations of breath. And you have this problem right now where your mind, as you try to focus on the sensations of breath, your mind is coming up with all this other stuff, right? It's coming up with all this other stuff and it's trying to pull you off. Even though you're trying to grab it very intensely, it's trying to pull you off to this and that and make you let go of this focus. Okay? So there's another layer you can add on to this that will take all of this additional conceptual activity and basically latch it on to the meditative process, to the training process. And therefore you can edge out the conceptual activity that is unrelated to the activity. All right? And so this sort of hack, we could say, or technique is something that you find described in the Pali Canon. You find it in the Middle Indian period. You find it all the way up through the Tibetan material. And as I said, this technique was given to me by one of my teachers who also spent 30 years training in Zen. So this is not at all a new technique. Okay. So in addition to focusing your mind on the sensations of breath, you need some other activity that is part of the meditative intent. That part of the meditative activity, part of your intention, you need some other activity that is part of the activity of meditation that you are doing. Remember, meditation is in doing something deliberately, doing something intentionally with a number of qualities active in your mind. So right now, we're trying to deliberately, intentionally, actively keep the mind on the sensations of breath. But our mind is conceptually running around with a bunch of stuff that is unrelated to that activity. So how do we fix that problem? Well, you fix that problem by bringing that conceptual activity into the process that you're training in. This is one way to do it in the beginning. So what is a really easy way to bring all that conceptual activity into the activity you're doing? By counting the breath. Now, some people will say, well, if I'm counting the breath, aren't I losing focus on the object of meditation? Because I'm trying to focus on the sensations of breathing, and now I'm visualizing numbers and saying numbers in my mind and counting. Aren't I losing the object over and over again? No, you're not. The activity is the meditation. The whole activity is the meditation, is the training. So as long as your mind doesn't leave the activity, you haven't lost the training. So yes, if you were already a great meditator and you could just hold your mind on the sensations of breathing, and for 7 breaths you could just do that and it was no problem, great. You know, have a nice day. You can log off now. But if you had even some difficulty holding your mind on the breath for 7 breaths, then you need to add another technique so that you can overcome this initial stage of distraction. And that's most people. All right? So what is this the specific technique that was given to be my teachers that has proven quite effective over a number of years for both myself and my students? What I call intensive breath meditation also includes counting by visualizing numbers. So you can use the numbers that you visualize can be black or they can be white. Doesn't matter. Just choose a color. It doesn't matter what font the numbers are in, and it doesn't really matter how clear the numbers end up being as long as they are relatively roughly hazily recognizable as a 1, a 2, etc. So how does this look? So you would breathe in with the mind on the sensations. So imagine it like a movie reel. We're making a movie, right? And the movie is about some amateur meditator meditating on their breath. So you start by placing the mind on the sensations of breathing, and it stays on the sensations of breathing as you breathe in. That's the first part of the movie. The next part of the movie is it stays on the sensations of breathing as you breathe out. That's the second part of the movie. And then there's a brief interlude where the camera pans up and it sees the number 1 on a screen. And you hear the sound, the sound 1 is said as part of the film. And then the film goes back to a new breath coming in and a new breath going out. And then on the movie screen, the camera pans up, 2. The number 2 appears on the screen and the sound 2 is heard. And then you go back to breathing in and then breathing out. So the movie is the tactile sensations of breathing in, tactile sensations of breathing out, and then a number with the sound of that number. So in, out, 1. In, out, 2. Now, how are you visualizing the numbers? You're visualizing the numbers by seeing them here, about the size of your thumb at about arm's distance away from the body. That's how you're seeing the numbers. And when you see the numbers, you also say very loudly, forcefully in your own mind what the number is. So this is the first technique. And adding these numbers to your meditation will then pull all the extra conceptual activity that would have been running around by seeing images, emotions, random thoughts. It'll pull all of that into the actual activity that you're doing. Bang, right? It pulls them into the frame of the movie. Next, what I recommend usually is doing 3 rounds of 7. So you would count from 1 to 7 and then 7 to 0. And when you get to 0, just take a moment at this stage of the training. Take a moment to just observe your mind and see what it looks like before you breathe in the next breath, and then carry on with 1, 2, 3, up to 7, and then 6, 5, down to 0. And once again, when you hit 0, just take a moment to observe the mind, the quality of the mind. How's the mind doing? What's happening there? Again, just a brief moment. And then carry on and do 3 rounds like this. And this is what I call Foundation 1 or intensive breath meditation. So we can now give this a try. And once again, I have the bell down here, so I'll ring it when we get to the end of the session. So let's give this a try now with counting. And then for those who have been following along up to this point, let me know in the chat after this sort of how it went, how you did. But during the session, try to keep your mind doing absolutely nothing other than the activity we have selected, because this is the most important point of the first 2 stages of training in meditation. Placing the mind and placement with some continuity is what they're called in the ancient literature. All right, so let's do 5 minutes. So first, place your mind on the breath. Again, breathe in. Feel where the tactile sensations are strongest. When you find the strong sensation, for me it's now over here, place your mind on those tactile sensations and breathe in and breathe out, keeping your mind on the tactile sensations. And then when you get to almost the end of that first breath, just visualize briefly the number 1 and say the number 1 in your head. If you have trouble with visualization, then just say the number very loudly in your head and then go back to the tactile sensations. Breathing in, breathing out. When you get near the end, 2, and so forth. So we'll do that for 3 rounds, and then we'll pick it back up with questions and answers. Okay? And here we go. Okay. So, comments, questions? Everyone's so far away. I think I'm going to bring you closer. Yes. Come here. Come here. Yes. Yes. Hello. So hopefully those of you who did a little bit of foundation, well, one intensive breath meditation just now had a better experience than with the first approach. The first approach was just to place your mind on the sensations of breath without any extra tools and to try to just brute force your mind to stay where you put it. Most people find that impossible. The second technique, okay. So one of the followers, Offer John, said he's just listening today. So quite a few people then, I would say, probably usually find that if you place your mind on the breath and then you do counting, that what happens is you actually notice that you've lost the count quite often before you notice that you've lost attention on the breath. You go, oh, I was on 3, I think. Wait, no, was it 6? Was that round 1 or was it round 4? Or you're counting and then suddenly you're on 9 and you're like, how did I get to 9? So adding the counting with the visualization, with the mental recitation of the numbers that you're on for counting, pulls more of your mental activity into the actual process of holding the mind on the breath. So this is what I call intensive breath meditation. And it's highly effective. So the some of the ancient texts from the Buddhist tradition on training and meditation, like the Bhavanakrama from Kamalashila, as well as the commentaries that came afterwards, indicate that the solution to the problem that everyone has, even now as modern people, where you can't keep your mind on the object of meditation when you first start, and where your mind seems to go absolutely nuts when you first start, the solution for this is to place your mind with great force on the object of meditation. So there's just a tremendous number of, if you go around, I hope I'm not calling anybody out. Hopefully this is, don't be offended if this is you, okay? But there's just so many sort of do nothing meditation things on the internet now. There's so many just don't do anything and that's meditation, and if you do nothing for a long time then it'll all work out somehow kinds of teachers and approaches. And yes, of course, it's true that one of the very advanced forms of practice, sorry, just adjusting the camera there, one very advanced form of practice is to basically sit and do nothing. But but for that technique to work, generally speaking, you need to be able to sit for very long periods of time. By way of analogy, when you look at how those practices work in the texts where they're taught, what they tend to say is it's a bit like having a glass of muddy water. If that water is left to rest without stirring it, then it naturally clarifies. So all of the BS on the top of your mind will naturally settle down. And then it'll be like completely pure, clean water on top. That's what it'll be like. But if you have ever done this experiment, if you take a glass of muddy water and you actually stir it up and you leave it to sit, it can take days for it to settle. Continuously unstirred, it must be, for days for it to settle. So if you're trying to, as a modern person living in the modern world, make significant progress in settling the mind, you need a more forceful technique to get over these initial stages of the mind not being settled. Yes, of course, if you're listening to this and you have your retiree, for example, and you have 16 hours a day to devote to your practice, fantastic. But if you're still in the working world or you have other responsibilities, this technique, intensive breath meditation, 5 minutes at a time, will undoubtedly cause you to make progress. One of my students who had already been meditating for 30 years said that when she started doing intensive breath meditation, she made more progress in 6 months than she had in the previous 30 years. And the reason is that if you're trying to do other techniques without a foundation of being able to keep your mind on the activity that you intended to engage in, then it's going to be very difficult to make progress in other types of meditative skills. Okay? Right. What's next? So once you have some ability to keep your mind on an object, some ability to place your mind on an activity and keep it there deliberately, intentionally, in the specific way that we're talking about here today, then the next technique you need is something to take you from that initial stage of practice, which is placing the mind on an object and holding it there with some continuity, to the stage where the mind can remain settled and remain focused on an object for a much longer period of time. And probably the most effective method I have seen for this as a rapid, let's call it like a rapid induction method, you know. It's not, I don't want to equate it with hypnosis because it's not hypnosis, but if you're trying to induce a meditative state very, very quickly, one of the most effective, if not the most effective methods, is body scanning. Body scanning. So the second technique that I teach is body scanning. Generally, I teach it standing up, and then I teach it walking. But since the theme of this is to sit and see, not to walk around and see, we'll do it as a seated practice. So if there are no questions for now, then I'll proceed with some instructions for that practice, and then we'll get right into it, and we'll just do maybe a 10-minute body scan. And for those of you who have been able to follow along up to this point, you should, after 2 short sessions of breath meditation and when we get finished with this body scan, you should start to feel some change in your body and some change in your mind. So why is body scanning meditation so effective? Body scanning meditation is incredibly effective because you are washing your nervous system. It's like giving your whole nervous system a clean. You're giving your whole nervous system a quick scrub. And you're allowing the nerves, the muscles, the internal organs, etc., everything just to calm down. And if you're trying to keep your mind somewhere, keep the mind locked onto some object, then having your whole system be calmed down is a much better way of keeping the mind focused than simply trying to brute force keep your mind on an object. So intensive breath meditation, first you gain the ability to keep the mind on the object. Then body scanning meditation, we're going to use that skill and enhance that skill of placing our mind on one object to go through the body in a systematic way and make the whole system calm down. With the whole system calmed down, the mind will then naturally be more inclined to remain on the activity we have set it on, which then enhances all of our other meditative capabilities. So, in brief, this is the justification for putting them in this order. And in my way of teaching, this then will help a student go from the third stage of the second stage of meditation, fixation with some continuity, up to what's called patch-like fixation in the text. Patch-like fixation means that you can place your mind on an object, and when it starts to run around, you immediately notice, oh, it's running around, and you bring it back to the activity that you intended to engage in. And then someone says they have to leave a little early. Totally fine. This was a first session. Nobody had this on their calendar. So my plan is, as I said, to try to do this every day from maybe, again, somewhere between noon and 2, maybe noon and 3 London time. So yeah, come back when and if you can, and we shall carry on training in these as intensively as we can. Right. So body scanning meditation can take you, once you have a foundation in being able to hold your mind on one object in one place for some period of time through some more intensive form of practice, which is what you need if you're living in the real world. You need to be able to go from your mind being an absolute mess, doing whatever you were doing in the real world, to being able to drop into a concentrated state pretty quickly, and then use some other technique to enhance your ability to drop into an even calmer, even more relaxed, even more intensely focused state. So this is where body scanning meditation can be highly effective. So once again, body scan meditation can take you from, in my humble opinion, the second stage where your mind can hold an object for a short period but spends most of the session running around doing whatever, to the stage where your mind mostly stays on the object of meditation or stays on the selective activity, which is training and meditation. And it mostly does this. When it runs away, you can immediately bring it back. It can take you that far. If you train in it more intensively, it can also take you to the stage where the mind doesn't leave the activity at all. So continuous fixation on the object of meditation or the activity of meditation. So now we'll do a 10-minute body scanning meditation. So when you're ready, here we go. This is Foundation 2, Body Scanning Meditation, 10 minutes. First, prepare your mind once again by placing the mind on the breath intensively for a couple of minutes. Okay, now we're going to start with the left foot. Place your mind in the left big toe, second toe, third, fourth, fifth toe, ball of the foot, arch, top of the foot, heel, ankle, lower calf, upper calf, knee, thigh, upper thigh, hip. Place your mind in the right big toe, second toe, third, fourth, pinky, ball of the foot, arch, top of the foot, heel, ankle, lower calf, upper calf, knee, lower thigh, upper thigh, and inside the hip joint. Now bring your awareness to the front of your pelvis region, and then the back of the pelvis region, including the buttocks. Bring the mind to the tailbone. The anus, perineum, and the sexual organs. Now bring the mind to the lower abdomen, lower back, the middle of the abdomen, the mid-back, and the barrel of the chest at the top of the chest, and the back of the top chest. Bring your mind to the right shoulder, bicep, elbow, forearm, wrist, thumb, pointer, middle, ring, pinky. Bring your mind to the left shoulder, bicep, elbow, forearm, wrist, palm and back of hand, thumb, pointer, middle, ring, pinky. Bring your mind now up to the collarbone region, the lower third of the neck. Middle third of the neck. Upper third of the neck. Place your mind inside the joint between the skull and the neck. Bring your awareness to the back of the scalp. Left side of the scalp. Right side of the scalp. To the right ear. Left ear. And the forehead. Focus on the center of the forehead for a moment. Now bring the awareness to the left eyebrow, right eyebrow, left eye, right eye, the nose, left cheek, right cheek, upper lip, and the chin. Bring your awareness to the top lip, to the bottom lip, to the skin inside the mouth. Take a moment to scan each one of your teeth as best you can. Bring the awareness to the roof of the mouth, the tongue, the area below the tongue, bring the awareness to the throat, now let your awareness slide up inside the body to the very top of the scalp. And hold your mind on the most sensitive point on the top of the scalp for a short period of time. To finish the meditation, bring your awareness down now to the lower abdomen. Don't artificially stretch the lower abdomen, but just breathe and place your mind and your awareness in the lower abdomen and breathe low and deep. Okay. That concludes 10-minute body scan. If anyone has comments or questions, pop them in the chat at this point. Otherwise, I'll continue blathering on and talking about meditation. Okay. So for those of you who made it this far, you're probably having the experience now that the system is much calmer than it was an hour ago, having done 2 sessions of intensive breath meditation and a session of body scanning. If we take out all the discussion in between, only amounts to about 20 minutes of practice. So if you're feeling pretty good having done just this amount, that's a strong indication that these 2 techniques, if you combine them properly, could change the whole quality of your day with about a 20-minute commitment. One of the things that I teach is how to take meditation into your ordinary life. That's something I think is incredibly important. And this body scanning technique is one really, really important way of beginning to bridge the gap between your meditation practice and your ordinary experience. So, how does body scanning meditation begin to bridge the gap between your ordinary life and everyday experience? Quite often, if you are grounding your awareness from day to day in your body, then your mind will remain more calm and you'll be more aware of what your mind is doing, and you'll be more aware of what your emotions are doing, because your emotions do have a physical component. You feel your emotions, generally speaking, in a column that runs through the center of the body. If you look at Western research into body maps of emotion, you'll see that emotion tends to run, roughly speaking, in a column through the center of the body, and then some of it is also centered around some of the physical organs, for example. And so becoming more aware of your body will make you more aware of your mind and more aware of your emotions. So this is the first point. A big part of training in meditation is being aware of what your mind and emotions are doing from moment to moment. And being aware of what your mind and emotions are doing from moment to moment allows you to change what your mind and emotions are doing from moment to moment. You see? Until you're aware of what your mind and emotions are doing, you can't change them. But if you train in techniques that allow your mind to remain within the system instead of running all over the place, to remain within the system of your body and mind, then as negative emotions come up, as anxiety comes up, as these problems arise in the mind, you can apply actual antidotes to these problems. Yeah? Good. Okay. So the third technique that I teach, generally speaking, is walking meditation. And walking meditation, if you want to do it to a high level, if you want to do it with some degree of sophistication, you need to be able to do more than just scan the body. You need to be able to actually, you need to let the mind abide in the fundamental nature of tactile awareness, which is actually different than the first two types of meditation we've just done. Of course, you could also just, with intent, focus the mind on different points in the body, which is one technique that I teach. But much more important, much more critical skill, actually, is being able to abide in the fundamental nature of the different types of awareness that you have. That's a technique that is actually, in an important sense, not a technique. It's learning how to gain insight into the fundamental components that make up your perception. So if you're familiar with Zen practice, in Zen practice you do things like just sitting. And in just sitting practice, you do things like you sit there and do nothing. But what is the point of sitting and doing nothing? Well, of course, if you ask strict teachers, that they'll hit you with something for asking that question. uh, since we're at about the hour mark, why don't we take a short break and pick it back up in about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll pick up the discussion from where we are now. Okay? I'll see you in 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. My phone died on me. I was using it to monitor comments, but I have it on the charger now, so it should be back up shortly. Uh, let me see here. Well, in any case, I think I'll just carry on with the instructions, and if there are questions that come through during the session. Oh, I see. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. Yes, so if there are questions that come through, my phone should be back up in a minute, so I'm just going to carry on with the discussion. So we were talking about Zen. We were talking about Zen and the practice of just sitting, and how this differs from practices like the ones we were just doing. So, as a general principle, meditation can take, I mean, there are thousands of different kinds of meditative things now. There are apps, there are guided meditations, there's sound baths, there's aromatherapy, kind of, you name it. There's just countless forms of meditation now. But when we're talking about meditation coming from a more traditional perspective, coming from sort of the Indo-Buddhist traditions and Chan and so forth, there's really a much smaller number than that. Quite a few of the things that are called meditation aren't really meditation from the point of view of more traditional schools of meditative training. So I'm not saying that those things aren't beneficial in some way, but they don't meet the criteria of being a full-on meditative state. They might make you calm, they might be relaxing, whatever. But when you're talking about meditation, there's generally two kinds. There are placement meditations where the mind is put into some state or is resting on some object. And then there are analytic meditations where the mind is analyzing something with a combination of logical reasoning and direct observations. So these are the two forms of meditation. In the modern era, you find descriptions of these, you find the terms associated with these being used for other things. So I'm not sure that I want to use the terms, because if you search those terms, then you'll end up in kind of la-la land of random stuff. Amongst the types of placement meditation, where you're placing the mind in some state or on some object, okay? Placement meditation can come in a couple of different flavors. I'm pulling back up the comment section here. Hold on. Okay, good. So placement meditation comes in two flavors. Placement meditation can, generally speaking, you can either use a great deal of intent to place the mind on a particular thing or activity. So for example, when you place the mind on the breath, you have the intent that I'm going to take all the activity of my mind and squeeze it into being highly observant of the sensations of breath, the tactile sensation of breath. If that's too difficult, because your mind is still running all over the place, then you say, as we did with intensive breath meditation, instead of just squeezing it all onto the breath, I'm going to layer a conceptual activity on top of it that's related to the activity of training and concentration. I'm going to layer another conceptual activity on top of it, and I'm going to do that whole activity as that's what I'm intending to do, right? And since you're intending to do this and you're doing it deliberately and you're squeezing all your mental activity, all the bandwidth of your attention into that activity, that is at least training on the way to meditation. The second type of meditative practice that's in the category of placement, where you're just placing is placing the mind in a state. So if you're placing the mind in a state, this is quite different than placing the mind on an ordinary object. Because if you generate, for example, loving kindness or compassion or patience, or a mind that is charitable, or a mind of perseverance or guru devotion, faith, if you generate a mind that is a huge number of awareness that you may pass away at some point, etc., there's just a tremendous amount of emotional sort of refinement or attitude refinement or motivational refinement that occurs when you do that kind of activity, when you do that kind of placement. You take the activities that your mind would normally engage in on the surface, and you retrain the entire surface of your mind to engage and react with reality and experience in a different way. So that's one aspect of placement meditation, where you generate the mind into a state. Another aspect of placement meditation, where you've placed the mind into a state, are becoming aware of and abiding in the fundamental nature of the different types of awareness that you have. And this is quite different even than holding your mind in a particular attitude like loving kindness or compassion or generosity, charity. So if you're holding the mind in a particular, if you're holding, basically, how do I put this? When you start looking at Zen texts, you start seeing things like the intention of no intention, the motivation of no motivation, the action of no action, doing, non-doing. And these meditations, this technique has to do with abiding in the nature of the different types of consciousness that you possess. If you have years and decades and hours a day to do that practice, then you can simply sit there and do nothing, and these things will occur to you naturally, especially if you have a teacher who's pointing them out to you as you have the correct experiences. But if you don't have that, it's easier to break up the types of consciousness you have into more digestible exercises and learn how to rest the mind in each type of consciousness, which is foundation 4 in the way that I teach these techniques. So when we're talking about walking meditation and we're talking about standing meditation, I'm also talking about learning how to do opening the tactile sense gate. Opening the tactile sense gate is a type of meditation in which you are abiding in the fundamental nature of the tactile consciousness. And this is quite different than scanning tactile sensation, in which you have placed the mind with intent on a particular object, which is a subset of the totality of tactile sensations. One of those, you have to intend to do something, and you engage in a set of activities, and you're doing something in particular and placing the mind somewhere in particular. If you're abiding in the nature of tactile consciousness, the nature of your tactile consciousness is to generate tactile experiences and be aware of those experiences. So abiding in that, by having that gate open, right? All your senses are like gateways through which experiences arrive. Abiding in that gate, with that gate fully open, is very different than just looking at little pieces of the tactile body. Doing body scanning is fantastic for making the mind more calm. But if you want to take the show on the road, as I sometimes say, you need to gain the ability to rest your mind in the fundamental natures of the different types of consciousnesses that you have. In, first are the 5 external ones, the 5 senses, and then consciousness itself. So When we start talking about moving from intensive breath meditation to body scanning to standing meditation, walking meditation, usually this is where I make the transition from simply scanning, i.e., placing the mind on a bunch of different objects or on one activity, to abiding in the fundamental nature of at least one consciousness. Is this making sense to everyone who's here? Hopefully. If not, please do ask questions, make comments, express concerns. If you're watching this after the live is finished, put comments down below, and I'm quite good at following up with comments. So here's an exercise to help you bridge the gap where if you're trying to do something like Zen practice, where the practice is to just sit, basically with all 6 sense gates open simultaneously without deliberately or intentionally doing anything whatsoever, right? Which is a very demanding activity. Let's start with one, just tactile, and see how it goes. And I'll give you a couple techniques to make it easier to get into the full experience of the tactile body. So, okay. If you're just joining in, we've already done Foundation 1, intensive breath meditation. So we've done some meditation on just the breath very intensively. We also did Foundation 2, which is body scanning, becoming aware of the whole body as a bunch of pieces of the body. And now we're going to use a technique that will help us transition into something like standing or walking meditation, which is best practiced by opening the entire tactile sense gate. So qualitatively, subjectively, is a very different kind of meditative experience than placing your mind on some activity or some object. All right. So, in brief, here's there are a couple different bridging exercises I've gotten from my teachers that can help you open the totality of the tactile sense gate so that your mind can abide in its natural nature of being clear and knowing without doing something in particular. And then once you have noticed, oh, okay, this is what it's like. This is my mind simply existing and doing what it does, i.e., generating experiences and knowing experiences. Once you've captured that by simply noticing it's going on, then you can notice when you're not doing it. And then the meditation goes from being an exercise in trying to keep your mind on a particular object to an exercise in not letting your mind fall out of the natural condition. In other words, just sitting. And if you notice you're doing something besides just sitting, then you have to pull your mind out of whatever it's actively doing and go back to doing non-doing, right? So this language that seems very mystical on the surface begins to sound actually kind of common sense when it's explained properly. So first we're going to do some doings in terms of tactile sensation to get us closer to being able to hold the whole tactile gate open, to get us closer to being able to abide in the nature of tactile sensation without doing anything or adding anything, okay? So the first bridging exercise is this. So let's do a very brief body scan just to drop back into the body. Start with maybe just 1 minute on the breath, so intensive breath meditation. Begin. For the body scan that we're about to do, I'll remind you, don't analyze, don't try to figure anything out, don't imagine anything, don't visualize anything. Just become aware of the actual tactile sensations as I list off the body parts. And then once the mind is in a calmer state, then we'll do 2 different bridging exercises to try to begin opening the tactile sense gate completely so that we can rest in the fundamental nature of tactile consciousness. So first, just place your awareness on the right foot, right ankle, right calf, knee, thigh, inside the right hip. Place your mind on the left foot, ankle, calf, knee, thigh, inside the left hip. Place your mind on the front of the pelvis, the back of the pelvis, tailbone, anus, perineum, and the sexual organs. Bring your mind to the lower abdomen, the middle part of the abdomen, and the barrel of the upper chest. Into the right shoulder now, right bicep, elbow, forearm, wrist, palm and back of hand, thumb, pointer, index, ring, pinky, left shoulder, left bicep, elbow, forearm, palm and back of hand, thumb, pointer, middle, ring, pinky, bring your mind now to the lower third of the neck, including the collarbone area, middle third of the neck, the upper third of the neck, and bring the mind now into the back of the scalp, left side, right side, left ear, right ear, to the forehead, left eyebrow, right eyebrow, left eye, right eye, nose, left cheek, right cheek, upper lip, lower lip, the chin, the skin inside the mouth, teeth, top of the mouth, bottom of the mouth, tongue, throat, bring the mind now up to the top of the head, now from the most sensitive point on the top of the head, stretch your awareness down to the fingertips on the left hand. So keep those 2 points active. let that go. Stretch your awareness now from the most sensitive point on the top of the head to the right fingertips and your right nail beds. Now let that go. Stretch your awareness from the top of the head to the left toe tips and the nail beds on your left foot. And let that go. Now stretch your awareness from the most sensitive point on the top of the head to the right toe tips. And let that go. Now stretch the awareness from the most sensitive point on the top of the head to both hands, left and right, into the fingertips and nail beds of both hands. And hold that for a moment. Now take your awareness, stretch it from the top of the head, letting go of the hands to both feet, to the toe tips, the heels, the nail beds of both feet. Hold those 3 points. Okay. Now, without losing the feet, stretch your awareness down again from the most sensitive point of the scalp and bring it into the fingertips and nail beds of both hands. So now your awareness is stretched between 5 points. So hold your awareness at the top of the head, the fingertips on both hands and the nail beds on both hands, the toes and toe tips and toenails and heels of both feet. In brief, hold the top of the head, both hands and both feet. Hold 5 points. Okay. So questions on that technique, place them in the chat, and I'll just talk a bit more about what we were doing there. So the techniques that I teach are based upon 20 years of personal experience, as well as getting a master's focused on the cognitive scientific research into meditation, comparing that with the most ancient systems of meditative description from the Buddhist canon. And then my PhD was focused on Buddhism and philosophy of science. So based on both personal experience and training with actual teachers in these systems for long periods of time. So the technique that I just showed you comes from Chinese martial arts and Taoist practice. The holding the 5 points is a technique that helps you spread your awareness through the whole body very efficiently. And it's something you can take into your ordinary experience pretty easily. So if you're standing at a grocery store, or you're walking from your car to the front of your work, or from the front of your work to your car, this sort of thing, you can bring your awareness to the 5 points and spread the awareness into the body pretty quickly. So it's a very helpful little hack if you're not able to simply abide in the nature of tactile consciousness at any given time. You can hold the 5 points and start the process at least. You can do that as sort of a bridge between your ordinary activities and trying to get into a full-on meditative state. So the next technique that enhances your ability to open the tactile sense gate, I'm going to discuss a little bit of theory, and then we'll jump into that next. And if no questions come through the chat, then we'll just carry on and do the technique. So if a person is truly and fully blind, for example, they don't even see darkness. They don't even see the absence of light. A person who is fully sighted, who can see, when they close their eyes, they register that there's dark. And when they open their eyes and there's light around, then they register light and objects and so forth, right? So your so-called visual consciousness, as it would be called in meditative texts on training the mind, is this faculty of the potential to see something. So this faculty with the potential to see something, if it's not seeing anything, generates an image of darkness, of black. And if it's seeing colors and light and other things, then after some processing in your mind, it generates the experience of objects and light and shapes, for example. So in the same way, with your tactile sensations, your body may not be feeling anything in particular in a particular location, but your whole body has the potential to have a tactile sensation. And so even in the areas where you're not feeling anything in particular, the tactile awareness is, we could say, is open there, right? It's already open there. It's already available there, but it's a bit like having your eyes closed and covering your eyes and having it be completely dark. So even if there's nothing in particular registering in a certain spot in your visual, in your tactile field, right? Like maybe for your hand, there's no particular sensation on the top of your middle knuckle or something. Okay, fine. You don't have to feel anything there, but in the same way as if you had your eyes closed, you would become aware that there's no particular tactile sensation in that location at that particular time. Yeah? And so this is going to be important when we do the next exercise, where we're actually just trying to abide in the nature of tactile awareness rather than holding any particular point in the tactile field or doing something with tactile sensation. So this next exercise comes from the Indo-Tibetan tradition. It comes from the Mahamudra tradition, where the technique is to learn how to make the 5 external senses less reactive and to abide with the 5 external senses completely open without conceptual content influencing very much what it is they're doing and experiencing. And then to, once the 5 external senses are less reactive, to turn the attention towards consciousness itself, the mind itself, and then do the same thing with consciousness. So obviously we're not going to go that far today, because we're at 90 minutes already. We're going to stop at 2 hours. But in terms of tactile sensation, we're going to learn how to open the body of tactile sensation and abide in that awareness today. If you have some previous experience in meditation, you may be able to do this fairly quickly. Okay. So, if you've been following the stream up to this point and or you found this later and you've been following through with the different meditations, we did 2 intensive sessions of breath meditation around 2 to 5 minutes each. We then did a 10-minute body scan, and then we did a 5-minute body scan and another 5 minutes or so holding the 5 points inside the body: the hands, the feet, and the top of the skull. So this next exercise is another bridging exercise that puts you right on the edge of fully opening the tactile consciousness and getting rid of the jargon. What that means is that you become aware of the entire tactile field of experience. And becoming aware of the entire tactile field of experience, which is the nature of that consciousness, you can then rest in the nature of that consciousness without doing anything in particular. By nature, tactile sensation, the tactile body, we could say, generates experiences of tactile sensations, tactile stuff, the feeling of your clothing, the feeling of the air moving through the room, the feeling of blood moving through the system, the feeling of breathing, etc. Hunger, thirst, whatever is occurring in the tactile field. It generates those experiences, and then it is aware of or experiences or is cognizant of those experiences. And then later, our mental awareness, our consciousness, adds other layers to those experiences. But before we add those layers, there's simply the very fact of the tactile body and the tactile experience. So to be able to actually access, well, what is that tactile body in terms, like what's actually going on there when I'm not thinking about it, not dividing it up, not scanning it, not holding 5 points? What is this tactile body of consciousness? Okay, well, you generate and actually have that experience all the time. It's actually already there right now, but you don't notice. So how can you train yourself to notice the whole tactile field that's already there? Well, we did body scanning, so your mind is more tuned into the body. We did the 5 points, so more of your awareness. You're learning how to spread your awareness through the whole tactile body. So now we'll do the 6 directions. So the 6 directions is a again a technique that comes from the Indo-Tibetan tradition of Mahamudra. It's a very, very old tradition coming out of India, and is shared in common with some Hindu schools, as far as I can tell, shared in common with some Taoist schools, as far as I can tell. There are aspects of this practice that have made their way into Chinese martial arts. Like it's incredibly, I would say, well attested as a technique. It's found everywhere because it works. And my own personal experience, 20 years training in this stuff, highly effective for lay people who are trying to do practice in real life. So the 6 directions. So the 6 directions can be done with any of your senses, and we'll go over those as this series progresses. But today, we'll do tactile sensation. So once again, drop into the tactile awareness of the body, and I'll ring the bell. Drop into the tactile awareness of the body. Very quickly, we'll just break the body into large pieces and do a very brief body scan. So bring the mind into the left leg in its entirety, the right leg in its entirety, left arm in its entirety, right arm in its entirety, the barrel of the chest all the way from basically tailbone to the bottom of the neck. That whole, everything from there to there, the entire middle center of the body, bring that into awareness. All 3 pieces of the neck that we were dividing up earlier. The joint between the neck and the skull. And now just the whole skull. Okay, bring the awareness now to the top of the skull, that sensitive point on the top of the scalp. Stretch your awareness down to the both hands, tips of the fingers, and the nail beds of both hands. Without losing that, stretch the awareness now down to the toe tips and heels on both feet. Now, holding those 5 points, add the left arm. Add the right arm. Add the barrel of the chest and the abdomen all the way down to the tailbone. Add the left leg. And add on the right leg. Now that you have a general awareness of the body, gently release the 5 points and just become aware of everything that's facing forward, no matter where it is on your body. Now let go of that. Become aware of everything that's facing backward, even no matter where it is on your body. Let go of that. Everything that's facing to the left, no matter where it is on your body. Let go of that. Everything that's facing to the right, no matter where it is on your body. Let go of that. Everything that is facing upward. Let go of that. Everything that is facing downward. Let go of that. Now bring your mind to everything facing forward and backwards. Let go of that. Everything facing left and right. Let go of that. Everything facing up and down. Let go of that. Now we're going to add pieces together. As I say the directions, as best you can, just become aware of all of the components that are facing in the directions that I name. We're going to add them together. And when we get to the end, you're going to just hold all 6 directions as best you can. Front, back, left, right, up, down. Hold 6 directions. Refresh. Front, back, left, right, up, down. Hold 6 directions. Refresh one more time. Front, back, left, right, up, down. And now take a moment holding those 6 directions. Just very, very gently, slowly release the 6 directions. And now don't do anything at all. Don't change anything, don't adjust anything. Don't do anything, just abide in the awareness of the entire tactile body. Refresh the awareness again. Front, back, left, right, up, down. Hold 6 points. If 6 is too many, just do front, back, left, right. And slowly release the points and just abide in the nature of tactile awareness again. So if you have questions and you're live, put them in the chat below. Otherwise, pop them in the comment section for later. So hopefully, if you've done this whole 2-hour session with me, you've learned a few things about training and concentration, a few things about meditation with an object versus meditation on a particular fundamental consciousness, as well as some general theoretical knowledge and understanding related to meditation more generally. To recap what we've learned up to this point, I made the argument that if you're a modern person living in the modern world, trying to train in meditation, it's going to be very difficult, probably, to find the time to really invest in meditation as a seated practice. This is what most people struggle with. And when you do find the time to do seated practice, what most people struggle with is that you find the mind seems to go completely nuts when you sit down. If you do something like intensive breath meditation, which I call Foundation 1, then you can use that incredible force and power of mind where you apply the mind with a great deal of energy to the object of concentration so that you can cut through that initial layer of distraction. Then, having cut through that initial layer of distraction, you can do something like body scanning to deepen the concentration that you've already built up through Foundation 1. And I call this Foundation 2. After doing body scanning, when the mind is more calm and the nervous system has been washed, let's say, of disturbance at the physical level, and also washed to a degree of the residue of negative emotion and so forth about in the body, then at that point, you could do more sophisticated types of meditation, more difficult types of meditation that are much easier to bring off the cushion and into your everyday life. So the example that I gave was the awareness of the 5 points of the tactile body. So awareness of the top of the head, the hands, and the feet. This is something you can do standing, you can do walking, you can do it in what one of my teachers calls micro sessions, i.e. going from the store to the car, from the car to the store, while you're waiting in line, while you're taking a few minutes for lunch in the middle of the day. This is the type of practice you can do in very small bursts throughout the day. And then we moved on to something that is even more generalizable and even more important, opening the tactile sense gate in its entirety. So this is the first time in the way that I teach meditation that you'll actually get in contact with one of the fundamental types of consciousness that you possess, i.e. the tactile sensations of the body, the tactile consciousness, that you're simply abiding or resting in the nature of tactile consciousness without doing anything in particular, without trying to do something with that awareness, simply abiding in it and being in it. And there are later exercises in the way that I lay this out for city-dwelling lay people. There are later exercises where you can then open the visual, open the auditory, open the gustatory, open the olfactory, and then open consciousness itself so that you can learn how to abide on each of the types of consciousness that you possess. And if you can do that, then there's even more sophisticated things you can do with your meditative practice. So once you can open the tactile sense gate, it's a bridge because it makes the mind much calmer, that makes the body much more comfortable, so that the workshop you're trying to do the work in, which is the body and the surface of the mind, that's the workshop for all of this sort of spiritual training and spiritual work and meditative work. When that's much more pleasant to be in, then it's easier to stay in there and do work for longer periods of time. If you get in the workshop and it's smelly and loud and noisy and everything hurts and you don't want to be in there very long. So the techniques I've given you today, including opening the tactile body, will help you clear out the workshop and make everything else that you want to do in meditation easier. So on that basis, you can then begin to take this practice of opening the tactile sense gate, for example, into the rest of your life. And if it's too demanding to hold the 6 directions open at the same time, then hold 4 of them open. If that's too demanding, then use 5 points. If that's too demanding, then scale it back to just holding the head and the hands, or just the head and the feet, whatever's appropriate to the time. So then you can begin taking these techniques that you've been learning out into the real world, which is the real point. There's not enough time, as I've covered in other videos, there's not enough time if you don't use some of the time in between meditative sessions in your ordinary life. There's simply not enough time to do these practices to a high enough level for them to become extremely profound. unless you're using some of that time in between to reinforce what it is you've learned on the cushion, and then use what you've learned from doing it in your ordinary life to enhance what you've done on the cushion. And then you have a virtuous cycle. The time in between sessions enhances the sessions. The time in the sessions enhances the time in between sessions, and it goes on and on. So if you're capable, then you hold the tactile sense gate open while you're doing all sorts of things. You can do this while working, while having conversations with people. I don't recommend using it while driving. I don't recommend using it while operating heavy machinery. You want to be fully focused on, if you're doing something dangerous, fully focus on that activity, and don't divide your attention up in any weird kind of way. It's not a lesson you want to learn the hard way. Okay, well, if there are no questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing any new ones, any new comments or questions. If there are no comments in the chat, then we will draw it to a close here for the day. We're at about 2 hours. We did a fair amount of practice. For those of you who watched and didn't have the ability to do the practices with me, I'm going to put timestamps down below, and you'll be able to go through, and if you want, you can just do the practices. And what else? I'll probably chop this video up into shorts also, so that you have the ability to go through Dr. Jones live clips and just do some of these things as independent meditations, whether it's body scanning or opening the sense gates or intensive breath meditation. And at some point, I'll probably put up something that's like studio quality, sort of like, here's how you do each one of these things, kinds of instructions. All right, well, I'm not seeing any new comments or questions come through, so that's where we're going to draw it to a close for the day. Once again, if you're watching this from another time or place, please do look at the information below the video. There's ways to support this activity. You can do a more intensive training by joining the school course that I have listed. You can send me a donation through my GoFundMe. I also have, through my Facebook page, a charitable link if you'd like to support the charitable work that I'm doing in support of these kinds of practices and more traditional charity work and Buddhist charity work. Okay, so please do like, subscribe, leave comments and questions, and find me through all these other channels. Every little bit helps to keep this activity that you saw today relatively free and available to everyone. All right.